What's going on, everyone? Jackson here from Vendetta Sports Media, and welcome to another episode of the Court is in Session podcast. As always, if you guys enjoy watching these, listening to these, if you're watching or listening to us on YouTube, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you can be notified whenever a new episode of the podcast drops. Or if you're listening to us on Spotify, then go ahead and give us that 5-star rating. Really appreciate it. And share it on socials as well. I have a special guest joining me today. He is known as Shai Media on Twitter, so you can go check him out, Shai Media on Twitter. His name is Matt. Matt, how are you doing today? Big OKC guy, big OKC episode. Love to have you here today. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on again. It is appreciated. And thank you for that introduction. I'm really excited just to talk some Thunder basketball. I've been a fan for about 5-6 years now, so happy to share some opinions, just where the team's at and whatnot. I know you're a big Grizzlies fan from your Twitter. Love what the Grizzlies are doing at the moment. They made a great run in the West. I was probably rooting for them, definitely in the West. I thought they were going to take the Warriors, but
Yeah, it's tough. It's going to be another one of those, what ifs, because Ja gets hurt, like they're still down and everything, but then they come back the next game and they absolutely shellac the Warriors by a massive amount. I can't remember how much it was, but again, happy to have you on. And for everyone that's listening or watching, something we're going to try to do with the podcast over the summer, because there's not going to be moments like how it is right now where there's a lot of free agent signings going on. We obviously have the KD and Kyrie saga, the Rudy Gobert trade. Those are the things that have kind of made this free agency a little bit spicy. So what I wanted to do with a lot of these episodes of the podcast, there's going to be some kind of mini episodes here and there where I'm trying to bring on fans from other fan bases. There's my co-host, by the way, Matt. That is Pacific Union Railroad. My trusty co-host over the past few years of every video that I've ever done for Vendetta Sports Media. I live like 100 yards from a train track.
That's great.
So
I don't live close to my co-host, so you're doing much better than me.
But I want to try to have fans, like Twitter leaders from other fan bases on here, just so that way, personally, really myself and anyone that's listening has a better understanding of these fan bases. Because OKC, I think right now, very misunderstood from the mass general media, and then from the Twitter hoop spaces. Because you have, and this was something I was going to bring up later, and we can just kind of briefly touch on it right now, is people like Chris Vernon. I know you've been hard on Chris Vernon recently. And of course, I see a lot of Chris Vernon stuff, being a Grizzlies fan and him being so intertwined with Grizzlies media. And then someone like Bill Simmons also, which we don't really care much for Bill Simmons over here. We crap on him a lot on articles and in podcasts and everything. But I just feel like OKC is really misunderstood. I think they're getting an unfair shake when it comes to their rebuild, when honestly they're not really tanking. They're acquiring young talent. They're making excellent picks, making trades, just acquiring more draft capital. What's your response to that? Why do you think that OKC is getting so mistreated when it comes to tanking, when there are worse teams like the Houston Rockets that are clearly doing the best that they can to not win games?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's refreshing just to hear your perspective, because so many, not to use casual, but kind of media outlets kind of paint OKC as this kind of lash, small market team. They're the bad guys, all this tanking, and we can get into that. That's a whole, you can even got a moral question in the NBA. No, just it's nice to have that perspective, because I think we'll get into it, but there's only so much you can do as a small market, and you can even speak from a Grizzlies perspective. You can't just go next year and sign James Harden. You just can't. It's a small team that needs to be done a certain way, and we'll get into that. But no, it's really refreshing just to hear that perspective, to be honest.
Yeah, and hey, small markets got to stick together.
Absolutely.
When Milwaukee won the championship, it felt like I won the championship, because it's
for me as well.
Because I mean, they're super small market, and they got a superstar in Giannis, and they win the chip. He sticks with them. Everyone from the outside is yelling, they need to fire Budenholzer. Giannis needs to get out of there. He needs to get a trade. He needs to leave. He wins his championship. So that really helps
beautiful.
small markets like us, and it shows that what the NBA is working and trying to keep superstar players in their home markets, in these small markets, and give them a chance to compete.
And
So,
that's why we've got our bird rights. We've got all these
mhm.
protections coming in just to keep it so it's not heavy to the big markets. Also, I've just got one rule, speaking from a Thunder fan to a Grizzlies fan. We do not mention 73.
I was not going to bring it up.
We're never going to
I
mention it.
could have, but I am a respectful host. I
I
am
appreciate
respectful
that.
to everyone that comes on here. It's not that type of podcast. We're just here to celebrate the game of basketball, the game that we love, and to just chat
Perfect.
about it for a little bit. So you talked about that you've been a Thunder fan for a few years now. How does someone from pretty much on the other side of the world come to be a fan of a team that's in Oklahoma, of all places?
You'd be surprised how often I get asked that, even in my like day to day, because OKC is not they're not a successful team at the moment. So it's like so I'm from Scotland, just so I'm Scottish. So
Mm-hmm.
like that's quite. It's not a basketball country. Let's put it that way. Basketball's not huge. There's some great guys at the moment, maybe on Twitter as well, just doing some great stuff for UK basketball. Fully support UK basketball, but obviously the big leagues, the best basketball is in the States. So that's why I followed it. So for me, I think we had a wee discussion just before we started this, just on how I became an OKC fan is Russ. And if people ask me, I just say Russell Westbrook.
Mm-hmm.
And some people might not understand that because he's so polarizing. But I just say Russell Westbrook. This guy was electric. Like I started watching after his MVP season, so I watched all those highlights. In fact, dunks, the passion, the competitiveness, the assist, the just raw athleticism. Like that's really what made me an OKC fan. And obviously, looking back, Kevin Durant was an incredible player for us. James Harden, we had a nice history, a nice run, and we were very competitive. So that's how I fell in love with OKC.
That's awesome, and a bit of a Grizzlies connection there too with that, because John Morant, he said that the player that was his favorite player and the player he modeled his game after was Russell Westbrook, which kind of turned off our boss here at Vendetta. His name is Trey. He's not a a Westbrook guy. He never has been. I've been known to hop on the Westbrook like dislike train. I'm not going to say hate train, but
No,
it's
he's
just it's
polarizing.
he's very polarizing. But I cannot deny how great he was in that solo OKC run where they're not making the playoffs without him. And players have always gotten paid around him. I saw the stats of the
Steven
types of
Adams,
players. Yeah, hey, shout out Steven Adams. Love Aquaman as he's called here in the Memphis
of
area.
course.
But yeah, lots of players that probably should not have gotten paid got big bags because of Westbrook. So can't deny that. Can't deny the impact that he has had. And an MVP is an MVP. He's in a very exclusive group, especially when you take into consideration averaging the triple doubles. Like he made
Yeah,
it to where averaging the triple double, we don't bat an eye at that anymore. It's just like it's whatever. It's almost expected at this point because now you have players like Luka Doncic that are coming in and they're starting to average close to triple double numbers.
yeah.
So when you have a player that does that, it's almost like the same level as like what Steph Curry has done to the three, where it's players are shooting these 35-foot three pointers and they're just like, oh well, if you don't hit that, then you just suck, you're not a good basketball player.
Yeah.
Whereas Steph started doing it, no one else was doing it. Now it's almost expected. Like if LeBron, Dame, if they're not hitting those shots, it's just like they're on an off night, they're having a bad night.
Yeah, that MVP season was like there's still not words to describe that. That is just bliss, like for an OKC fan. Even though that team is horrible. Like that team is horrible. But like Russ, like oh to me he's always that MVP. Like one of the most beautiful MVP seasons I've ever got a chance to watch.
So
Um
since you became an OKC fan, what's a moment that sticks out in your mind to you personally? Like is you're like when you're like, man, I'm proud that I'm an OKC fan and this is the reason why. What is that moment?
I mean we're kind of talking about Russ, but I love the Paul George era. Like a
Mm,
very underappreciated era for the Thunder. That 2018-19 season, MVPG 13. Like I'm not gonna lie, Paul George was my favorite player on that team. So I was so sad when we traded him to Clippers. And obviously, we can get onto that because that's
mm-hmm.
a whole era in the Thunder rebuild. But for me, it's just that game winner against the Nets. If you remember that, they were down, I think, roughly 20, 25 points. Just this incredible
Mm-hmm.
comeback. Paul George ends with 47, maybe Russ had a triple double. Just Rust, fake handoff, drive in, PG open, pump fake, and it's just swish. And it's just so cold. It's just so cold.
I
That's my
I love seeing Paul George. Excuse me. Oh gosh, I love seeing Paul George perform at a high level. He's one of those players I've always enjoyed watching. I just feel like he's always just hasn't been able to get to that next level. You know, there's always been something in his way, something that he can't overcome, and sometimes it's not necessarily his fault. You know, he is having an MVP caliber season. He's supposedly the next superstar when he's with the Pacers, and then he breaks his leg, and then he's out for a significant amount of time, and he has to get back to that point, and he starts to get back to that point with OKC, but OKC just can't get over the hump. And so now OKC decides, okay, we're going to embrace the rebuild. We trade him off to the Clippers. And now with the Clippers, he can't stay healthy. Kawhi can't stay healthy. The vast majority of the players on the Clippers can't stay healthy. They haven't had a significantly healthy season. The last time they were healthy was in the bubble, and they hardly played with each other. And then they end up blowing that 3-1 lead. And then they just haven't been able to get back to that point ever since. But he's
been very unfortunate in his career. I still think he's a Hall of Famer. I still think he's going to be a Hall of Fame at the end of his career, but just incredible talent. Like, to me, it's like Shai and him as the two smoothest guys in the league. Like, this guy's 6'8", 6'9", like he's doing behind the back, like spin moves, fadeaways. Man, Paul George can move.
He is definitely one of my favorite players to watch, and I am praying for a healthy season from him.
Absolutely.
Just because I think, and with being in a big market like LA, then you see him a lot on TV. And if him and Kawhi are healthy, then of course the NBA is going to shove it down everyone's throats. Like, hey, you need to watch the Clippers play this season. And I'm like, you know what? I'll be kind of okay with that because I like watching Paul George. And I like watching Kawhi too. I got to see a lot of them back in the day, going to see Spurs games in Memphis, and then also when he was with OKC, I saw him twice with OKC in Memphis too. So getting to see Paul George live. Fantastic, absolutely loved it. Excuse me. Gosh, let me take a sip.
You gotta keep that water handy.
Yeah, and I promise this wasn't on purpose, but I have a Beatles cup here. I know you're
Scottish. Oh, Beatles.
But...
Oh, I see the British jokes come out now.
Yeah. See, there you go. Huh? Yeah. Which I haven't made this joke either, but for those of you that don't know, we are recording this on July 4th, so
I wasn't going to mention it.
Yeah, but I think Scottish, no love lost for the British here on this.
No, I mean I can't see this would be too political, but like I see Scotland as just its own entity, but it's all good.
All right, so you do a lot of work on Twitter with Spaces. Now this is something that I feel like over the past year, this past NBA season, Space has kind of exploded, and I've noticed this from Grizzly Spaces too, because I'm in Grizzly Spaces a lot, talking, interacting with people, and it's been super fun just from my perspective, getting to meet so many. Like I didn't know there were so many active Grizzlies fans on Twitter. That is just something I had no connection with whatsoever. I started following a few people. Like I was like coming into this year, it's like I'm gonna be more active on Grizz Twitter. I want to find more people and I want to interact with them. And then these spaces started, and you get in the spaces early, and the next thing you know, they are a massive deal. And by the time the playoffs start, it grows from like 3 to 5 people, which is how many of us were in them to start out the year for the first couple of weeks. By the time the playoffs hit and it's the Warriors series, there's 200 to 300 people in these spaces. It's absolutely insane. So talk to me about how you got started in spaces for OKC fans.
Yeah, so I'm part of a group called OK3 Spaces, and that's with 2 guys I know called Alex and Skit. That's at Alex Dr. Prof and OKC Skills.
I will drop all socials for them, and as well as the OK3 Spaces in the descriptions for both. Yeah, but anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
That's great. Thank you. No worries. I think spaces get a bad rep just because sometimes they're not used in the right way. But if you really like thankfully at this rate we've got an audience that can have like respectful conversations. People can come up. Like for you saying it's a great way to just meet different people, and obviously Twitter's great because you can just like meet everyone. Like I'm Scotland and I'm speaking to an American, like just about sports. Like that's great. That's through Twitter. But through Spaces, it's nice that it's just not like just DMs. It's not like tweets. It's you're actually speaking to someone, and it's so accessible. Anyone can join. Anyone can request stuff. Anyone can speak. Doesn't matter like how many followers you have. Like it's a great space to just do that. And we've been going for about 6 months now. We started our group up in January, but yeah, it's going strong. Started to put out some other content, like just on a Twitter page. I'm sure you'll link that, but thanks
Mm-hmm.
for that.
Yeah, the power of spaces. It's been, like you said, it could be a good thing or it can be a bad thing, and I've seen it
Yeah,
used in both ways before, and sometimes that's even creeped into the Grizzly spaces. There was actually a point to where we almost had to, unless we really knew who the Warriors fan was, they were not allowing Warriors fans to come up there because that's when it started to spiral out of control into toxicity, and that was something that regardless of what was happening after a win, after a loss in that series, even in the Timberwolves series, we did not want the toxicity to grow. Like, and there's a difference. Like,
no,
there's you can obviously like you can talk trash a little bit, but there's a respectful way that you can talk trash.
yeah, exactly.
But these people are just they're coming in here, they're just being disrespectful to not just like the players or anything, but to the people that run the spaces, that are in the spaces, to the Grizzlies like media members, and that's the stuff that like we tried to shy away from. And then it's like you go into these bigger spaces that are run by massive Twitter accounts, like for the Los Angeles Lakers that have like 6, 7, 800 people in them,
Yeah,
or like, so I've been in some Golden State ones, I've been in some other fan bases, and it's just absolutely extremely toxic. But it's like it's always the smaller market teams. Going back to that smaller market team love, I feel like the smaller market team spaces are the spaces that have a bit more level-headed to themselves. They're at least have a system in place on how they want to do things, and there's an order to it all.
yeah,
It's not chaos like it is in these other spaces where people are trying to talk over each other. It's
yeah.
okay, raise your hand, you're next, then you get your point across, the next person. We do it all respectfully, but I'm like with you. I love connecting with the fans, and I love the tool. It's probably the best feature that Twitter has ever put out there.
Yeah. Just not the edit button.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I do think, especially for small market fans, if you're talking about big market, I think it's a lot easier to be less of a casual for small market fans because like no one just becomes a Thunder fan nowadays. Like especially with like the way we are at the moment, like it's I think it's very easy to see how the highlights, Sports Center posting Los Angeles Lakers, Knicks, like that's all the media versatility you're gonna get, and like that's a big audience and a big market, and that's just how the NBA is. Like it's an economy. They made 8 billion this year, but
Jeez.
like so it's nice. I think there's some kind of like accountability within small market fan bases that they kind of half know what they're talking about.
I agree with that. Some of the best basketball conversations I ever had, just from pure love of the game, have come from these spaces. So even when I don't talk in them, there's sometimes I don't talk. I just like to sit back and I just like to listen, because sometimes they'll be on early in the morning here, and I'll be at work or something like that. So I just turn it on, put my headphones on, and I'll listen to the hour 2 hour conversations that are going on in there, and it's some of the best basketball conversations
Yeah.
that you can listen to. It's almost as good as this podcast. I'm joking. It's probably some of the
No,
basketball talk that they get
I
in
do
there
like
is
the
great.
podcast. Like I'm a huge podcast guy. I listened to podcasts for the last 3 4 years, especially through the lockdown period. Like just constantly. Some of the people I follow is like Down to Dunk is a very good Thunder podcast. Like if you probably heard of Through the Wire.
Yeah.
I listened to them for a good amount of time. So I'm a huge fan of podcasts. So it's amazing to just be part of one now. But just going back to the spaces, like you say, like all these people can come on. Like we've had, I don't know if you've heard of Andrew Schlecht. He's part of the Athletic, one of the Thunder beat writers. Like
Hmm.
we've had him on. We also organized two guests to come on. I don't know if you're familiar with No Ceilings.
I don't
They're
think I am.
no worries. They're draft like expert kind of guys.
Okay.
So we had Tyler Rucker and Collar Taluber on just to pick their brains because obviously OKC
Yeah.
very much in a draft position,
Hmm.
and that's where most of the kind of looks are rather than free agency and trades and whatnot. So it's been great to get their perspectives, and I think that's just another tool you get from the spaces.
Yeah, the Grit Spaces have do that from time to time. Also, they have people in there after the playoffs. one of the commentators for the Grizzlies on TV. His name is Brevin
Oh, that's
Knight,
great.
ex NBA player, used to play for the Grizzlies actually, and it's funny. I think he holds I think he holds the record for most assists against the Grizzlies. This was back in his Cleveland days, so they always bring it up every time that the Cavs play the Grizzlies, and him and Pete, who are the two commentators, they always get a good chuckle out of that. But he came into the space one time and he got to talk, and it was awesome to pick his brain and to listen
Absolutely.
and hear him speak. And there's been all types of other media heads, even some of the lead Grizzlies media personnel have jumped in and have chimed in and said their 2 cents. So to see from where it grew, again, from 3 to 5 people to hundreds of people and these massive talking heads and people that are considered in high regards in Grizzlies fandom to come in and to interact with the fans. It means the world to everyone. So quick shout out to Bryson and Grizz Spaces. The work that you guys have done is awesome. But now we'll move on and we'll get into kind of the meat of what I wanted this podcast to be, which is the discussion about what OKC is doing right now and kind of their future outlook, how they've embraced the rebuild, how Sam Presti has built this stockpile of ammunition in picks to where he can kind of do almost whatever he wants. He's got the equivalent of FU money in picks right now, and he kind of put that on display in the draft of going out and getting a pick, and we'll get into that. But I just want your reactions. What was going through your mind on draft night? You guys had the number 2 pick. Obviously a lot of talk going around about who was going to be at that pick, although I felt like it was going to be Chet all along, regardless of who went number 1. And obviously that was the case. You guys get Chet Holmgren at number 2. But I just want your perspective, your reaction to the draft, and how these new players will fit with what's going on. SGA, Josh Giddey, I think, is an excellent starting point for the franchise. Also, Lou Dort, which I'm cool. He got paid, but when you got your player, then you got to pay them. So, Chris Vernon, take. It's a good contract. It's a good contract.
Yeah.
It's their guy.
Let's leave Chris Vernon out of this.
Yeah.
I think he's been mentioned too many times. Right. So just draft stuff. Obviously, we took Chet, Usman Jang, 2 Jalen Williams, which is just great comedy. Like it's just the memes are just
my question.
Have you seen the Spider-Man one?
Yes. My question is though, is this like is Presti gonna assemble his army of Jalen Williams and just continue to draft a Jalen Williams every year if there's a player named that, or is he hoping this is going to be like a Highlander situation where they fight and there can only be one Jalen Williams, and so the winning Jalen Williams absorbs the powers of the other Jalen Williams until there's just one Jalen Williams left to rule them all and is the best basketball player of all time?
I think it has to be the second option, surely.
100%. 100%.
Yeah, there's no real. Yeah, I mean, it's just perfect. Like, I don't know if you saw the clip of. So, to differentiate, J Dub is the guy we drafted 12th from Santa Clara, and J Will is Jalen with a Y from Arkansas.
Yeah. Hey, that's where I'm from. Shout out University of Arkansas, Woo Pig, baby. That's my college. Absolutely. That's my college team that I root for. So
that's perfect. I still need to get a college team, so hit me up with some good ones because it's hard to watch from over here. But so let's just get into the draft. So, like Chet, he's a unique prospect. Like we saw this guy coming up through high school, and we're like, what is this? Not even like just like what is this? And that's what, when you watch Victor Wembanyama, and it's like, how is this even possible for a footer? Like, I think he's so unique that he could change a franchise. I think that's what OKC wants. You want a talented. He's probably one of the most talented big men we've seen in a few years in terms of the draft. Obviously, there's questions about and remarks about his frame, but like it's just such a lazy, mistake to make if you just want to use that as a thing. In my opinion,
and he's young. He can put on that body weight and you know what?
He's 19 years old.
He's 19, so he's not done yet. He's gonna get into an NBA system. NBA trainers, they're gonna be able to figure
NBA dietitians.
Exactly. He's gonna be able to put on some muscle. He's gonna put on some body weight. He's gonna be able to get a little bit beefier. And also, they were saying the same stuff about KD when the same franchise drafted KD. So.
It's just crazy. But no, I'm very excited because I think Chet fits very well with OKC because Mike Dagnall runs this kind of 5-out offense, and that's the kind of position that Isaiah Roby was in before he got waived last night. But like a big thing for OKC has always been the shooting, ranked 30th in shooting by like a stretch. Like the gravity on like drives is just it's non-existent. Everyone just collapses the paint and no one can hit the outside shot. I think we had Darius Baisley shooting like 4 or 5 threes a night, Dort shooting like 7 to 8 at terrible efficiency. Like I think one of our more efficient guys was our rookie Trey Mann. Like he was one of the most
Mm-hmm.
efficient like 3-point shooters on our team. So it's just yeah. So that's why I'm kind of happy we just drafted J Dub, Jalen Williams because he's actually a prolific like actual like
Yeah.
shooter. He's great off screens. He can kind of make you pay if you go under. He had some great catch and shoots numbers as well. I don't have them on me, but I'm sure you can look them up. Shell NBA University, they do some great just like specific stat stuff on that, especially for rookies. Um, I don't know how familiar you are. Do you go deep into the draft yourself, or because obviously the Grizzlies had a later pick, you take Jake LaRavia and
Yeah.
David Roddy.
I this past season was one of the worst seasons that I had in covering prospects coming up. But thankfully, I've got my boys over at the Jimmer Range podcast. Shout out those two guys, Carl and Cervantes. They're another podcast apart of our company, and they do a lot of great work. So I was very heavy lenient on them to help me with sifting through the draft prospects this season. But yeah, I was fairly familiar with a lot. Like Jake LaRavia, I knew who he
Yeah,
was coming into the draft. I knew how high regarded of a prospect like Jalen Williams, Usman Jang were, and I see why they are coveted so much. And
hmm
again, like I mentioned earlier, this Sam Presti, man, just the amount of picks that he has and just how well set up OKC is moving into the future. If there's a guy on the board that they want, he can go get them because he can do exactly what he did with New York on draft night. And it's like, here's just a bunch of future picks for your
with
one
great
pick.
protections. Great protections. It was like
Exactly.
top 15, top 20. Like, I don't think he's not giving up unprotected picks. He would never. I don't think anyone should be giving up unprotected picks unless. I mean, Gobert got unprotected picks, and so did DeJounte Murray. That's
Yeah,
quite rare
that's
in my opinion, but
oh yeah, five for Gobert. That is just.
wow.
I think, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But I think that may
hmm
have broken the market a little bit, almost
Yeah,
on the worth of trades. There's always one trade or one signing that always breaks the market, and I think the Gobert
yeah,
market um, broke it.
yeah.
But
Just
go
to
ahead.
get back to it,
Yeah.
so just to get through the rest of the process, so Usman Jang, I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna be like honest. Like he's got my full support, but I was not actually too happy we drafted him at the time. We did a draft reaction and we gave him all a grade. I gave him a C minus, just because it's the thing with OKC. Like draft a project player like Poku. Like obviously Poku
Mm-hmm.
exists, but like
I
to me
love
it just
Poku.
seems like another project player at the wing, 6'10", 6'11" guy that you're gonna have to give a lot of minutes. Like, and he might not. He might have a horrific rookie season and that's just acceptable because like this guy is going to take time to develop. But I was not sure about another projects, but now he's an OKC player. Hopefully, ruin stars
Yeah.
for him. But and then Jalen Williams, who wasn't actually a guy I actually looked into a lot. He actually wasn't on my
Mm-hmm.
top 50 big board when we put it out. So that's all you need to know. But starting to like watch some of his stuff, love the energy. He led the NCAA in drawn charges.
Yep, he is
So
the charge merchant.
6'11" Kyle Lowry. It's like, but no, he seems like such a great guy. OKC always quotes, "We draft people, not players." Like this is a person, like a special guy. Hopefully he's around long enough. And Presti's always had this thing of they. So for example, like we could have kept Isaiah Roby, or we could have got rid of that 34th pick. We could have traded it away. But we've never been in a position to say, why would we not take a guy just because we don't have a roster spot? They'll work that out later, which I think is the correct response, personally. But I'm curious what you think of that.
Yeah, no, Jalen Williams. Just to speak on him a little bit, his offensive game I mean, he was hit or miss in college. There were games where he was on. There was games where he was off. I got to see a lot of him, obviously being a Razorback fan and watching a lot of SEC basketball, which is how I got to see players like KD Chandler, new Memphis Grizzly, get to see him play and see how he played in the SEC tournament on his way to basically the MVP of the SEC tournament. But yeah, definitely high energy guy, high energy defensive guy. Our draft guys weren't too big on him in a sense of like a prospect of going super high, because there were some mocks that had him going like late first round.
Yeah,
And
no, I can understand. Yeah,
in 34, it's close. It's definitely higher than what I thought he was going to go. But
yeah,
I've always been along the draft strategy. If this is your guy, just pick him then, because it's worked out for the Grizzlies so far. Getting Zaire at 10, a lot of people question that. I think Zaire Williams is going to have a great career as a Grizzly, and it's the reason why they let Kyle Anderson walk, is because this front office has the full confidence in Zaire and his growth, and he's been working out with Desmond Bane all summer long. So maybe he'll come back with Desmond Bane arms and have a Desmond Bane type
yeah.
leap.
He definitely needs a bit more weight to him, I think.
He
Just to be
definitely,
effective.
yeah, he is a skinny fella coming into the draft, but just like Chet, already a year in, could tell a difference. Can't wait for summer league, which is starting very soon for the Grizzlies, and the front office and the coaching staff has already said that he is going to have a similar role to what Bane did in last year's summer league, where they're really going to let him be the focal point of the offense and do a lot of ball handling to get his skills up, and then probably I would imagine he gets taken out later on because he's pretty important. You don't want to risk an injury.
Yeah.
And then similarly with trading up for Jake Laravia, and then trading back into the first round to get David Roddy out of Colorado State. Those are two guys that are, I mean, they are the most Zach Kleiman guys and Coach Taylor guys that you could find in this draft. And it was the most Grizzlies front office move to do a bunch of trades to get those two guys. So again, I'm always on that case of go get your guys regardless of positioning, even if they're probably not worth that pick value speaking wise.
You just want to make sure.
You just want to make sure exactly.
You want to get your guy. It's that simple. David Roddy was always an interesting pick for me, just because he's just such an interesting like player model for like a 6'4", like really buff guy. Like he plays power forward. Like it's gonna be interesting to see his role in the NBA. Jake LaRavia, I do love Jake LaRavia. Great shooter, underrated athleticism. You don't really see it, but we had Corey on. When we had Corey on, he actually got to work out with Jake LaRavia. So if you check that out, he has in his pin tweet, he has like Jake LaRavia doing like windmills and like between the leg dunks. So like he's an athlete, put it that way.
Yeah. I can't wait to see them in action and get to see them soon. Summer League starts this week. It's already started for some teams, but it really picks up this week. You got the Utah or the Vegas and Utah Summer Leagues coming up. Are you going to be tuned in a lot, watching highlights of the new rookies?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of bad that I'm looking forward to the Summer League more than the NBA Finals. That just shows the perspective of a developing team versus like a playoff team. But I was even watching the Kings versus Heat California Classic last night, just because like that's me starving for basketball. But I love Keegan Murray. Just to see a bit of Nikola Jovic. I mean, why not? I think Thunder have got their first game coming up. I couldn't actually tell you who it's against, but I'm very excited for that because our rookie roster isn't getting put out yet for Summer League. But there was a bit of controversy just on OKC Twitter just to like get it out because everyone wants to see who's playing. You want to see who's Chet playing, is Josh playing. Trey Mann would go ballistic in Summer League. He had a horrible Summer League last season, but he's improved so much just throughout his rookie year. Very excited for that.
So how do you see the new additions to the roster fitting in with the established players on the team? Mentioned earlier, I love SGA. I feel like if you are a true lover of basketball and just a hoop aficionado, SGA has got to be on the top of your list of players to enjoy watching. In fact, I made it And I won't mention the game that I was at live, but I went to go see that
I could
game, and
wonder.
he was not there, unfortunately. But he is high on my list of players to go see that I have not gotten to see yet. So when OKC is in town this upcoming season, I will have to be there and just hope that he is healthy again. Josh Giddey, there were rumors last year that the Grizzlies were going to get Josh Giddey if he fell to them, and I was like, I have no idea who is this guy. I haven't heard too much about him. After seeing him, I'm like, man, he would have been a nice pickup. I love Zaire, but Josh Giddey, he's a hooper. Lou Dort, I've always loved Lou Dort ever since he's popped onto the scene. I'm a big lover of defensive minded basketball players because that's just how I played, like in growing up, playing in high school and everything. That was just always the player that I was. I was basically the Jalen Williams. I was the defensive motor guy.
Well, it's grit and grind, isn't it? That's the Memphis mindset.
Exactly.
Yeah. I
So,
mean, Shai's the guy. Like if you're watching any of the world qualifiers, like he had like 32 on like
he,
20 shots, like just ridiculous stuff. But like he's going to be the guy in OKC, and there's a lot of concerns whether he would stay. But let's be honest, like he's happy to be here. He's a good guy. Like
mm,
he's willing to stick with the plan. Dort, I'm so happy we signed him on because there was the possibility that we'd lose him. And yeah, imagine the Grizzlies. Josh Giddey fell to the Grizzlies. Like that's crazy. I think I was so surprised we took him. I was actually hoping we get Scotty Barnes or even James Bouknight,
mm-hmm.
surprisingly, who hasn't played any minutes for the
Yeah,
Hornets.
I'm still high on Book Night. I haven't given up on Book Night.
Oh yeah, me
Yeah,
too.
he just hasn't gotten the minutes to shine. So his
Hmm.
will come to him hopefully.
Yeah, but Josh has had an incredible rookie season. I think against any other rookie class, he'd be rookie of the year conversations. But this rookie class is just unbelievable. Like it set the standard so high for this draft class. It looks completely different. But no, those top six guys, like they're all going to be top tier players in the league. They're all going to be top 30, top 40 guys. Some potential MVPs, some potential like all NBA guys in that like draft class with just Evan Mobley, who's going to be defensive player of the year
Yeah.
conversations come now again. Like, and you said you love that. Scotty Barnes also there. Like, these are going to be guys. Like,
Yeah, I think gotta mention someone like Cade Cunningham. I love what Detroit is
oh yeah,
doing. Also, they're high on my list. OKC and Detroit are high on my list of non-Grizz teams that are like I have to watch them when they're on, just
hmm
because of what they're building, what they're doing. They're going to be super interesting and fun teams, and I think Detroit is while not having like the same amount of picks as like other teams, and also like the Jeremy Grant trade, I think they probably could have gotten more out of it and probably could have been moving into this season on better footing, at least maybe with more picks. But I think with what they've done
yeah.
so far, I think the roster that they are assembling, you got Cade leading the way, drafting Jalen Ivey,
Ivy, yeah.
yeah, and stuttering all
He's
over the
going to
place
be
today.
electric. He's
He
going to
he
be
he will be,
electric.
and then Jalen Duren also. Shout out Jalen Duren, Memphis guy. I
Also, shout out Gabriel Partida, fellow European brother. Like he was one of my guys that I actually wanted in OKC just because the ice upside. Like this guy's, he could be a nice like in terms of like a late prospect. Like very raw athleticism with 3 point talent and European basketball tendencies. Why wouldn't you take a gamble on that?
man, I'm almost excited as OKC fans for the season to start because I do want to see how Chet and how Zhang and how Williams, both Williams, we'll just say J Dub
Yeah,
and J Will, how all of them fit in with next to SGA, next to Giddy, next to Dort. It's going to be really fun to see, and it's going to be really interesting what they come up with, what kind of sets they're going to run with the
yeah.
type of players that they'll roll out.
It's going to be a messy roster. I'd like Presti always drafts these positionless guys. Like we have like Josh Giddey running like the one and then the four defensively. It's just ridiculous. Obviously Shea's like that 1-2. Jalen, sorry, I was gonna say Jalen Williams. That means nothing. J Dub, like he's gonna be this great like 3-4, like can guard some guards. Like we love play positionless basketball, and we could have Chet bringing the ball up at 7 foot. like on transition, like it's going to be fun in OKC,
Yeah.
and I'm really excited for that.
There's just so many ways that you could attack. There's so many sets that you could run to keep defenses on their toes. It's going to be really fun to see, and I think as the season progresses, I think this may be the type of year where you start to see some of those close losses turn into close wins, just because I
Yeah,
think the talent is there and you have the extra years on Giddy, SGA, Dort. Those are the vets that the younger guys will lean on. And I think the younger guys that are coming in, I think they're good enough. And that's always the turning point for a franchise. And that was something that I saw with Memphis this year. Really was a lot of those close losses that they had in the past. They started to turn it into close wins. And even with young players like Ja and Jaren, you have Steven Adams, who's a veteran, but a lot of times he was not out there on the court at that point. That's always the turning point for a franchise when they can start winning those closer games. And I think this season, at least in my mind, in my prediction, as I'm looking at the NBA, even though we are a few months away from the start, I kind of see OKC starting to turn the corner a little bit, doing a little bit better, maybe not, almost like a fringe 10 seed is kind of where
yeah,
I see them being. And it's really going to come down to, can they succeed in some of those closer games? What do you think? What is your outlook for OKC this season?
yeah. So I'm personally not like the guys like, oh, let's make the playoffs next year. That's silly. Like, let's not do that. I think a lot of teams are going to be competitive next year. The Trailblazers are going to be better. Detroit's definitely better. Sacramento have like they've bought in. You've seen the free agency signings they've done and the trades to get guys. They're like, we want to make the play in at least.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and to be honest, I kind of hope they make it because I feel a bit bad. But like I think OKC could win up maybe like 31 games this season, but I don't think it actually affects the rankings too much. Just because I think a lot of the teams will still try to be competitive. So I still think we could be 11th, 12th in the West at least. Um, Obviously, like the way like lotteries work, it's like in the grand scheme, it's not just your conference. But I think around the 11th, 12th seed, I just want to see our guys make steps. Like
Mm-hmm.
development comes. Like I want to see guys get loads of minutes. That's kind of the point. I also wrote down a quote just from one of Press's exit interviews. Is he always said like we're pace setters, not clock watchers, and like Pressie's like a magician. Like when it comes to words, like
Mm-hmm.
he's just a poet, and he even recites some like Latin in his interviews. He's just a man, you know. He's just a madman. But like they don't want to feel forced to develop these guys to like teach them like to learn. That's the kind of message that he's installed outside the franchise. So it's interesting, but I don't see a rush. It could be he wants sustained success rather than like a short term reward,
Yeah.
which that's kind of what you want, I think, personally. Like you guys, you made a great like every young team wants to make the kind of jump that you guys did from a playing team to a top seed in the West, competing for a conference final place. Like that's what you want to do. And same with like what Cleveland did. You want to make that jump. But I don't think OKC makes that jump next year because that's a huge jump. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's just my thoughts.
That is a pretty massive jump. Again, I still feel like you said, they'll be, I think their ceiling, if everything worked out fantastically for OKC next season, like I said, I think their ceiling is the 10th seed in the play in, but
Yeah,
probably that 11th, 12th seed probably is going to be where they finish out. But I will stick by my statement that I think that you start to see what games that would have been losses last year start to turn into wins, which is what you want to see as a rebuilding fan base. And it was something that
yeah,
honestly this past season is what I went in wanting to see from Memphis, was just some of those losses, those bad late losses where things just kind of fell apart, turned into wins, and they started to turn into wins, and then they started to turn into more wins, and I was like, holy crap, what's going on? I was not expecting this at all. I was like, oh, I'd be happy with the 6th seed, let's not be a play-in team this year, or if we are a play-in team, let's be the 7th seed or something like that,
yeah.
but did not expect this to happen at all
The NBA
whatsoever.
is unpredictable
It
at the end of the day.
very much is. And this what I'm about to say, we can transition into like the next thing, the next part of this podcast, just kind of initial reactions to free agency, because there's been a few things that happen. It's been an all right free agency, uh,
Yeah,
but there's a lot of Grizzlies fans that want to go out and get KD because they want to win a championship now, and it's like, I'm torn. Like if KD was to come here, then it's like, okay, yeah, sure. I'm down with it. KD and Ja and Jaren, that could be a title team right there. But then it's like it's getting to the point where it's like there were massive arguments in the Grizzlies chat about if they had to give up Bane or Jaren, who would you rather give up and why? And it's like, at what point does it get to where you're sacrificing too much of your future on a what if now with a player? And I love KD as a player. I think he's one of the best in the world, but
Absolutely.
he's tried this in the past going somewhere else. Unlike with Golden State, because when he went to Golden State, he signed there as a free agent, so they didn't give up anything to get KD. But going to Brooklyn had to tear down what they were building. Now, I thought Brooklyn was building something really special. There's something decent up there because you had a lot of no-name discarded players that other teams didn't want, just thrown together by Kenny Atkinson, and they're a playoff team, and they were one of the most fun and electric teams. They're doing their little dance on the sideline. That was a fun team to watch. And they tore it all down. They fired Kenny Atkinson, and they tore everything down on going out to get KD and Kyrie. And now both players, 3 years later, may not be on our, or they're probably not going to be, because KD has demanded a trade, and Kyrie, even though he opted in, which of course he's going to opt in because it was, his 30 something $40 million, or the $6 million, which is what most teams were probably going to be able to sign him for. So I don't blame him for getting his millions on that. But everything's just being torn down. And so it's like, from a Memphis perspective, it's like, yeah, I'd love KD, but it's like for the right price though. And I think the Rudy Gobert trade might have broken the market for a KD trade, because if you're getting 5 unprotected first round picks for Rudy Gobert, then Kevin Durant is going to get the deed to the arena that you play in. Like that's what KD is going to bring you. He's going to bring you the entire franchise. He's going to sign the checks for Ja Morant after the game. So
that's perfect.
So
yeah,
what are your thoughts about the KD saga? Where do you think he's going to end up? Is there like a preferred destination or something that you have?
Yeah, so this is like something we talked about. It's like sustained success. It's like what Grizzlies and the Thunder are aiming to do. It's like this was a 3-year window they got for getting rid of Karis LeVert, all the draft capital, Jarrett Allen, and all these like coaches like Kenny Atkinson. That's what they got. They got 3 years, and they made the playoffs twice. Actually, 3 times, didn't they? They made it in the bubble. But yeah, like it just seems like a mess. Also, it's controversial because I'm an OKC fan, and I don't just like KD. I love KD.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's July 4th. Like, it was 6 years ago today.
Yeah.
So like it's a great anniversary to have this talk. But I love KD, like most skilled guy, like on the court. Like to me, he's like top 3 basketball player like in the league right now. I don't know how you do that at 7 foot. Like how do you move and score? But yeah, it's a saga, man. Like it's not even like it's a mess. I don't. They tried to build a super team. I don't think super teams work. Everyone's saying scary hours. They got James Harden, former MVP. They got KD, former MVP and Finals MVP and champion. And they've got Kyrie Irving. It's like, oh, it's over for the league. But it's not how the league works. It's not how basketball works. Things happen. There was a plagued by injuries. And I'm not blaming that as in like, oh, they didn't win it. Because there's chemistry issues. Like, you don't have the money. Like, last season, Bruce Brown was their 3rd best player. And I love Bruce Brown. And he's probably one of my favorite free agency signings that we'll get into later. But like, you don't have the money to get guys that can help, except guys on vet minimums and like buyouts markets. So I don't think it's the right way to construct a team is where I get to it. Like going out and getting these guys, obviously Brooklyn's big markets in New York, but it's just tough. And Kyrie is a personality to say the least. So but I think KD just wants to play basketball. Like, I accept the fact that he wanted to go to the Warriors to play good basketball. Like, it's hard to say that, but it's true.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's an absolute mess. So it's going to be interesting to see how this unfolds in the coming weeks, because you hear reports from everywhere. It's like, oh, he's definitely going to Miami, or KD's definitely going to Miami. He's definitely going to Phoenix. These teams are consistently on the call. They're checking in every day. What I'm hoping that what Memphis is calling about is that they're going to be in a similar situation what the Cavs were with the James Harden trade, where they kind of swoop in and they grab a player that just needs to be dumped real quickly, and they get him for the cheap and is a massive part of their success, which is what Jared Allen was last season to the Cavs. Again, they got him for basically pennies on the dollar almost. They gave up hardly anything and they got an amazing talent. It's crazy how that works sometimes. And again, it's just
and then Karis LeVert went to the Pacers in a
yeah.
separate deal to get picks.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was a explosion of a trade. But it's like, would the Nets rather have what they got from James Harden or have Jared Allen and Karis LeVert with all the franchise's picks? Like, I just think these top players hold the franchises to ransom because they can say, "Oh, I'm going to leave," and I have full support of player empowerment. But I think when you strangle a franchise, these franchises, they're big parts of the city. They're part of the economy. They're part of people's lives, their jobs. So it's quite hard to give all these players so much power within extent of the player.
So you talked about the Bruce Brown signing a 2-year deal with the Nuggets as a free agent signing that you liked, and we'll transition in to this part of the podcast. So, like I said, you've already mentioned that as a free agent signing that you really liked. What's a couple other, or however many more that you have of free agent signings where you're like, oh man, that's great, or do you have any where you're like, that's a mistake, that person, they overpaid for that guy?
Yeah, that's fair. I think a lot of this free agency has been extensions. Shout out Darius Garland, guy I love.
Yeah.
Get that bag, man. One just on the Cavs again. Rubio going back is a great deal. He was a big part of the success early on, and you never know, they could have been a playoff team if they had him for the full season. He didn't tear his ACL. So I think that's great because DG gets that mentor again. There's not too many it was a lot of re-signs, which I'm not a huge fan of. What are your thoughts on the Bradley Beal Supermax extension? Because I'm personally against that completely.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that Beal is getting paid just, I think it's like 4 or 5 million less than what Jokic is getting paid now. And Jokic just signed the largest extension in NBA history, which is understandable for Jokic. He's a back-to-back MVP. League MVP, so he kind of demands that type of money. And the Nuggets last season, they are a bottom tier lottery team without Jokic out there. They do not sniff the playoffs without Jokic out there. And the Nuggets, a fully healthy Nuggets team, I think is very dangerous out west. People are not giving them their due, their credit.
They're going to be top 4 next season.
They're one of my dark horse championship teams where I think that depending on how the matchups in the playoffs are, I think they can easily make a run to the Western Conference Finals, and then anything can happen once you get to the Western Conference Finals and then eventually the finals. But yeah, it's an insane, and that's one of the things that I had is just an insane. I'll never fault the player, is what I'm gonna say.
That's generational wealth.
For if I'm Bradley Beal, I'm signing a $260-something million contract for just a few years of basketball, fully guaranteed money. Yeah, absolutely. If things go bad and I get injured and I can barely play, then I'm just like John Wall. I play 40 games and I've collected hundreds of millions of dollars over 3 seasons from 2 separate teams. And
it's crazy. That's to me the players holding the franchise to ransom, because either he signs that or he leaves. And he wasn't an all-star this year. He was an all-star with Russ, averaging 30 points per game. But I don't think he's one of those all-star caliber. He's still all-star caliber guy, but he's not had a season to back it up. This one, I think he's actually done great in his as a facilitator role. Kind of did that kind of CJ McCollum moving from a shot creator just to kind of more working in the offense. So Point Beal, shout out to him, but $250 million, that's $250 million. Yeah.
Yeah.
A bit, you know, $1 billion is 1,000 million. I don't understand it, but so that's one of the signings I'm not a huge fan of. And again, that's an extension. I love all the rookie extensions because that's just
Hmm.
guys getting what they're due. Um, I was going to make a point just about the kind of older kind of guys getting long-term contracts because PJ Tucker, who's
Yeah.
37, and shout out to PJ Tucker because like he's a dog. I loved watching him guard KD in that series with the Bucks, and he was a big part of the Bucks championship. But he's still 37 years old, and he signed a 3-year deal. Do you want to be paying 10 million to a 40-year-old PJ Tucker?
I personally I wouldn't if I was Daryl Morey, but Daryl Morey's got his guys that he likes. It almost feels like he's basically just trying to rebuild the Rockets, but just with
Yeah,
Embiid.
I've seen a lot of jokes. I
With
mean, the Rockets with Embiid is like, hey,
Yeah, but it's
but
that's if the Rockets 5 years ago with Embiid, that's dangerous. But again, it's a
yeah,
37-year-old PJ Tucker and a James Harden that just hasn't looked like the same player ever since he left Houston.
no. And also just I always think it's funny how these guys always come back. DeAndre Jordan, Robert Lopez, and JaVale McGee. Like these guys have been in the league for like a while. They've been in it for a minute, but they're still getting like either vet minimums or just like longer contracts. I think JaVale McGee was 3 year, 34.5 million.
Yeah, it's
Like that's
crazy.
fun. Like I actually think JaVale did had a great season. Just and he was he a backup?
Yes,
Yeah, he was a
he
backup in
backed up Aiton. Yeah,
Suns. Like he had a great season, but you still want to pay him 12 million. Like Dort's making 17.5 a year. Like that's 5 million less for JaVale McGee, who's like he's.
and
But shout out to JaVale McGee. Get your
yeah,
bag, like.
exactly. I'm. Th- this is another deal that I was surprised when I saw it at first, just because he's had just the one explosive season.
Hmm.
But and that's Anthony Simons for 100 million 4 years from the
Yeah.
Blazers. And again, it's like I love the player. I like him, but
Hmm.
it's after one season. It's just like the thing. It's like I don't know. I don't know. Like I need to see a bit more sustainability, if that makes sense, to
Yeah.
give him this type of contract. But again, if he's their guy, then go ahead and pay him now because you could probably get him cheaper now, and you kind of avoid the a similar mistake of what the Mavs did with Jalen Brunson when they had an opportunity to sign him for a little bit less. And again, I'm going off of a
Yeah.
an ESPN article where Jalen Brunson's dad talked about this to the reporter at ESPN, where the the Mavs refused to give him a long term contract at a decent price. I think it was like around 15, 16 million last
Oh
off
wow.
season. And then of course he had his explosive season this season, and obviously his price goes up and the Mavs are
Yeah.
not wanting to match that price and they don't want to sign him for a long-term deal to that price. So then Brunson ends up walking and getting his bag from
Yeah.
New York. So if that's the type of situation and Anthony turns into that type of player where he is the number two guy next to Damian Lillard, then okay, yeah, I like this deal because you lock him up long term for a lot less than what he's going to be worth, especially with the big salary cap bump that's going on this season and what it's projected to be basically by the end of this contract. Then you absolutely got a deal with this
Yeah.
signing. So I guess I just need more time to make a proper decision on what I thought about this resign.
Yeah. I mean, I can understand that. Like, I think that's sadly it's just the way the NBA is. It's very reactionary. It's like we have one good year. Like Julius Randle had one good year. He's an all-star. I think they extended him after that, if I'm correct.
I can't remember if they
Um,
extended him after
I
that.
couldn't tell you, but I love Anthony Simons. Like I think he was averaging like 70% true shooting for like a stretch, which is just
That's
absurd.
crazy.
Like he was just shooting like incredibly from three and just hitting everything. Um, I I wouldn't go as far as say I wouldn't give him that. He was a restricted free agent, I think,
Yeah.
this season because I'm guessing they might have not extended him after his rookie deal or like after that 2 year period where they have the team option. I mean, he was a late pick. Like he was not like one of these like top 10.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if he's a lottery pick, but like he's kind of been a late bloomer for them. But if he gets his bag, like 100 million is a lot of money. I'm not pretending like this is change. It might
Yeah.
be a change for NBA owners, but like 100 million is a lot. But they must have to invest in this guy. I think he's going to be great along Dame. He was a bit bigger than Anthony Simons, but yeah, Blazers are in an interesting spot. But I think it's more important to just re-sign him, keep him, and then develop him if they want to. If they want to take it back, if they got rid of Dame, like I think you could not make him your franchise guy, but make him a guy for your future.
Yeah, and if you ever decide to blow it up, it's a movable contract,
Absolutely.
and it's not an outrageous a deal or amount of money. Again, not talking about change here, but in terms of NBA cap and what players make, it's not. Yeah. It's on the higher mid end, but it's definitely still movable to a team that would want his talents, especially if this is like the best that he is, then he can still contribute with that price tag on a competing team.
Yeah,
so
and I think he's going to get better. He's not on the max. Let's be honest. Like,
yeah,
maxes are like franchise players. He's not a franchise player. So if you're not paying him for a franchise player, I think you should be happy.
Yeah. All right, so we are at the hour mark for the podcast, so we will wrap it up with our final segment. Again, Mike, thank you so much for coming on, man. I've enjoyed having you on and have enjoyed this talk of basketball. But we are going to get into our final segment here now. This segment, it is titled Taking the Stand. This is, of course, called Court is in Session. There's a lot of puns going on here. Court, basketball. My last name is Law, so there's that.
Yeah.
So
there's a hammer as well.
Yeah.
If you want to dunk on someone.
Exactly. See, there you go. I mean, there's just lots of puns everywhere. What this is going to be is that I am going to give you, and this is pertaining to the question I asked you before the podcast started. This is why I wanted to make sure so I could ask you this question properly. But what this is every guest that I have on, either through stalking them on their Twitter page, so that way I could find a take to screenshot and be like, that's what I'm going to ask them about, just whatever. What I do is whatever take that they have, I am going to present it to them from the opposite perspective, and you have to make your defense. You have to make your case for whatever your take is. And so. Okay. Russell Westbrook. You have talked very highly of Russell Westbrook, and I've already mentioned that there are some people within this company that aren't big Russell Westbrook fans. They say things like he is a cancer to a locker room. He is not a winner. He puts up empty stats. Wherever he goes to, he causes more harm than good. He's overvalued by front offices. Front offices are always giving up way too much money, way too much capital and assets to bring him in. They'll point at something like what the Lakers did, where they gave up a lot of young pieces, or just at least depth at this point is basically what the Lakers need, because they're so injured and they just have G Leaguers and vet minimum guys instead of decent basketball players, and getting rid of players like Kyle Kuzma, bringing him in, completely messing up the chemistry. Some would say, why would you trade for a guy that can't hit three-point shooters when it's a three-point shooters league now? There's a lot that people have to say about Westbrook, but Westbrook is your guy. Westbrook is your guy. So make your case, take the stand. Why do you support Westbrook? And this is not just, this doesn't have to be like right now, because we've already talked about how he's definitely in the decline. But
agree.
This is stuff that people have been saying throughout his career, even during his MVP run. So defend your guy. Why is Russell Westbrook? Why is he one of the best players? Why is to ever be like one of the best point guards? Why did he deserve his MVP? Why was he such highly regarded leading up to this point, to where he's obviously starting to take a decline?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, every OKC fan has had to defend Russell Westbrook in their lives, so I'm more than happy to do this. Russ is like, I mean, he's just a lovely guy. First of all, like, what you see on the court isn't necessarily the guy he is. Like, everybody has an alter ego, but personally, I love that alter ego, and it might not fit well with the Lakers. I loved it when he was solo. I loved it when he was with Paul George. Like, there's always made the argument by Russ fans that he made the guy around him better. Like Harden averaged 36 points with him. Like Bradley Beal was an all-star for the first time. Paul George had his MVP season. We're not talking about Carmelo Anthony. That's a joke. But like Russ is like one of the most like nice guys in the league. Steph Curry, I retweeted earlier, like he has held this guy in higher rewards and high regard. Like he's he's done a lot more for the league than you'd think. Like he's definitely a guy you love. He's a father. He's the amount of stuff he's done. Like I don't live in Oklahoma. It's probably clear by my accent, but we're not. But like he's done so much for the community. Like he's just like a lovely guy. Like I'm spoken to me speak. I want to speak more about his character. Like this guy makes plays, but like it's a person league. Like everyone's human. So I think it's horrible that they want to degrade his name. Like if people started calling me by the wrong name just for the sake of just to annoy me, that's extremely petty. Like this is real people, real people's lives that you're trying to go at, the family name and whatnot. But it's all love for Russ, and it always will be because he's the greatest of all time in Thunder history, and he'll always be appreciated that way.
I love the answer, man. I absolutely love the answer. And again, I have done my fair share of trashing Westbrook in the past, but I will never, ever, ever take away from him his personal life. I always separate the two. Whenever I talk about Westbrook, it's always 100% about the player. I know he's a great dad. I know that he's a great person, but I never make things personal. Is my thing to go to. I'm always gonna, anytime I'm defending or that I'm criticizing a player, it's just strictly facts and from a basketball perspective. But I'm also never gonna take away the things that he's done in the past. His MVP season was one of the most electric MVP seasons to watch, and it was crazy the hype around him averaging a triple double. I can't also deny the fact of, like you said, guys got paid when they played with him, and they had some of their best seasons with him. I think that is one of the best statistics in defense of Russell Westbrook. It's not necessarily what he did personally, but it's what he did for others and what others did playing with him. And I think that
he's a point guard. Like exactly. At the end of the day, you can't average 10 plus assists for multiple years and then say he's selfish.
Exactly. Exactly so, but I think that's one of the best defenses that the pro Westbrook camp has come up with. The anti Westbrook camp, they've struggled, it feels like, to come up with a counter argument to that one. So kudos to the pro Westbrook camp for that.
Absolutely.
But again, Matt, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to join me here on Quarters in Session. Again, check out Matt's socials at Shai Media on Twitter, and also make sure to check out the OK3 Spaces. Links down in the description to all the social handles, including the Quarters in Session social handles. So if you're not following us on Twitter, you totally 100% should. I'm slowly trying to start to move more basketball content from my main page to over there, try to separate the two, kind of have like a personal page and then a basketball page. So hopefully we can get that going here soon. But again, links down in the description to all those socials. And again, if you're watching or listening to us on YouTube, make sure to go ahead, hit the like button, subscribe. It's free for you to do, doesn't hurt you at all, but it helps us tremendously here over at Vendetta Sports Media to try to continue to accomplish the goals that we are trying to accomplish. And of course, if you're listening to us on Spotify, greatly appreciate you as well. Go ahead and drop that 5-star rating. Please, thank you so much. That would be great. But again, Matt, I've said it 5 times already, I think. But again, thank you so much for joining, and thanks everyone for watching.
Thank you, honestly. It's been great.
And listening. Hey, again, I love having more people on, and who knows, maybe we can meet up and do this again in the future if OKC, if something drastic happens with them, or just to talk hoops in general, man. Yeah. Absolutely.
When we're both in the conference finals, we can have this.
Absolutely. We can have this That's going to be an absolutely amazing episode of the podcast. But again, thank you guys for listening. This is Jackson Law from Vendetta Sports Media signing off. I will see you guys next time.